Welcome to the Heritage Series of the UUSM Connections podcast. I'm your host, Jack Brennan, Connections at Unitarian Universalist of San Mateo. If you're a regular listener, then you know that the Connections podcast usually focuses on the individual people who are part of the UUSM community. This Heritage Series is different in that the focus is on the history of UUSM through the lens of the individual people who have the most history at UUSM. Our transition team wrote the questions that I will be asking, and the questions will be the same for every person who is interviewed as part of the Heritage Series. My guest today is Joanne Rovno. Welcome, Joanne.
Oh, thank you very much.
When and how did you first come to UUSM?
It was by a grace of God.
Okay.
No, in 1962, Steve and I were not married at that point, but a group of us went to the World's Fair in Seattle in 1962. And when we were there, I saw a throwaway paper. And of course, cleaning up, I picked it up. And it had questions like, do you believe the goodness of man? Do you want to do caring for others? I know God is within. If you think any of these things, you must be a Unitarian.
Wow.
And I said to Steve, have you ever heard of them? And he said, no. And I said, well, neither did I. And we returned to San Francisco and looked up Unitarians and met Reverend Harry Schofield, a wonderful, wonderful man from the East Coast who officiated at our wedding in that church in San Francisco in 1963.
Oh, lovely.
One Sunday he said, why are you still driving up from San Mateo? And he said, there is a Unitarian church there, you know. We didn't know. We both joined in 1964 and have been here ever since. And I found strength in the pews. I never felt this kind of acceptance, guidance, or caring in Catholicism. So this was the rock I felt under me. So I could go out and do what was called for me to do. The first hospice in 1979, the woman died in my arms, mission hospice. The AIDS community I joined in 1987, and I joined the chaplaincy group here at church, which fit so well into my hospice programming and background. I just felt that this was the place I could use as a strengthening to go out into the community. I wanted to be in the community. So I stayed here all these years. I felt like there was a family here. No matter which direction I was going in, I rarely had any obstacles. There once was an obstacle. Someone didn't want an AIDS patient here in the nursery. And I kept saying, that's no. And that woman was being paid by UCSF to care for the children. Right. So that was about the only time that I ever had a disagreement on my feelings. I was running a group of HIV men and families, and they weren't coming down with it, neither was I.
Right. 60 years.
I have been here 60. Not physically 60 years, because my husband was drafted in 1966. And so that meant that he had a choice of either a year in the jungle or 2 years in the hospital. So he took 2 years in the U.S. Naval Hospital in Agana, Guam. So I went there with a 2-year-old and pregnant with critter. I didn't know in those days what it was, and had a very good experience because they wouldn't let me work in Guam. The Navy had very certain rules, but I wasn't here for 2 years.
Okay.
So from 66 to 68, while this congregation was going through some separation about people who wanted the war and people who didn't want the war.
Yeah.
And so we lost some people, but of course, my husband saw them differently. Reverend Botley, our first contact with the minister here, and I didn't even find out till recently that he was a Methodist minister. It was a Methodist church,
right.
physical building. Yeah. Reverend Botley said to Steve, you're antagonistic about going into the military. And Steve said, back in Philadelphia, I was followed by the CIA for a while because my mother had me on some Jewish insurance policy. And so he had said, I'll never work for the government, and you've changed me. And they said, don't worry, you'll never be drafted. And he was 33, and I'm so glad. But the sad part is I watched the bombers go over the hospital every day at 30,000 feet, holding a 2-year-old pregnant, and knew that there was a Vietnamese lady who was standing in the same position.
Right.
I came back very differently, of course.
It changed you?
Yes. Everything does, but this really does. If I hear going over our house in San Mateo, the helicopters, I cringe.
Gosh.
I cringe.
What has kept you here all these years? Why did you stay?
I think I felt like I had a family here. I had never met people of such different backgrounds. And so it seemed to me like a family, like you would have an aunt or an uncle. And I had no relatives here in California. And so because the church was my family, I stayed no matter what.
Right. That's yeah. I think that's
and I wanted a family. My relatives stayed in Philadelphia.
Yeah. When you came out here, you were without your extended family.
Right, right. I had 3 brothers and maybe 20 cousins. My 3 brothers, unfortunately, saw things in a different political manner than I did. They were followers of the blonde devil, as I call him. We don't speak about that.
Yeah.
And one brother was in the parachute army, and I think still meets with army friends from during that time, but he wasn't over there. He was in Paris. I mean, no.
Yeah, different perspective.
Yes, yes.
What do you remember most about your early years at UUSM?
I had from 64 to 68 before we left. And we actually felt that we wanted to get involved. Steve could not be involved. He was working too many hours. So I thought I could be involved, and I wanted to be involved. And so at some point, they had the group that was going to care for people within the church to have the essence of saying, yes, whatever they need, I will do. That's what I did. I met different people, and they listened. They listened. They didn't say, well, when did you make your communion, and how, and I don't even want to tell you how I got out of Catholicism, but maybe if there's time.
Oh, tell.
Okay. Steve and I wanted to marry, but he couldn't be Catholic because he would always give assistance for abortions. And that was,
he was a physician?
an anesthesiologist. Okay. Anyhow, we were trying to figure out what religion we would be. And so finally, it got to the point that I had to go to a wedding in Philadelphia, and I went to St. Dominic's Church, Catholic Church in the city, and said, Father, I haven't been to confession for, 3 years. And I'm going to be in a wedding, and I have to receive penance for French kissing my partner who I'm going to marry. And he said, well, I won't forgive you for that. Were you in here last week? I said, no, Father, I wasn't. He said, I'm not forgiving you. I said, you have to. And he said, no, I don't. And now in my mind, as a 22-year-old, I think I glanced up and said, "You knew this was going to happen, didn't you?" And then I felt in my mind that I slammed the door, but I'm not sure I did. But I was alert enough to go into the next penance box and say the same thing. "Father, I'm going to be in a wedding. I have to receive communion, and would you please forgive me for," and it was a mortal sin, "if you died with that, you would go to hell." And he said, and there was a pause, and I thought, oh. He said, "Say 5 Our Fathers and 2 Hail Marys." And that was it. I left, and I went back to the apartment and called Steve and said, "I've left Catholicism," and it's been 22 years of indoctrination.
Right.
But I left it, and I was happy. And it isn't a mortal sin anymore. The church, of course, has changed and done not too well when they've changed.
Yeah. Which staff members or lay leaders would you say have made the most impact over the decades, and why?
I think for me, it was the choir. The choir as a whole.
Lovely.
Was what I remember being in a choir in grade school and high school, and played French horn in high school. But the choir meant more to me because it put me in a gentle place. I didn't always appreciate the sermons. They kind of rolled over me. But the choir, I knew each individual in the choir, and they were my family, and whatever they said, and they were movers and shakers, not just in music, but in other things. So that's who they were for me.
That's lovely. What were the highlights in UUSM's history? When did the congregation come together around common mission with a sense of meaning and fulfillment?
I remember trying to buy a building. Originally, there was money put aside to buy almost 3,000 foot acreage where the Odyssey School is at the end of almost going up to Sawyer Camp. I remember that was the big thing, because here, the first time I came to this church, I was sitting in the YMCA on El Camino, and I was breastfeeding my son. So this was 2 years after we had gotten married, and what were they doing that day? They had a guest speaker, and it was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was Ken Kesey who was here. It was the most bizarre thing, and I'm breastfeeding this baby, and this man is up on the stage throwing a ball toward the people, and the people are throwing it back. And I thought, I certainly don't understand people's behavior, but somebody at the end of that said, "Reverend Botley would like to introduce himself to you and also show you where our children are meeting up the street." And so there was this something that people were trying to get you involved with the church. And so we did, but I knew that they were searching for a building. And by the time we came back, they had bought this building. It was enough for everyone. I'm glad we have it, and I've watched it change.
Sure.
And I laugh when I say that I had strengthened the pews, because our pews have gone on to another lifetime, and now we're comfortable for people who have pain in their butt sitting. I'm one of them.
You mentioned that you'd seen a lot of changes in the sanctuary, and before we started today, you were telling me that there was a library there, right?
Yes.
What other things do you remember? There's a library upstairs?
The library downstairs, it was the room where people chatted, and for book group, or we slept there overnight when we had Home and Hope. There were books there that were religiously oriented, but then the minister at the time was upstairs in an office, and the books that were in that office were most of the children, one side anyhow, were children's books, and that was wonderful. We didn't worry as much about the children's religious education, except when the seventh graders did not want us to come in and teach them. The seventh graders didn't want the parents to come in and tell them things on a Sunday morning. And so the parents, I think, were up to our necks with
Sure.
kids. We would rather pay someone. So we went to the board and we said, could we pay to have a religiously trained teacher to teach the children? Seventh graders aren't listening to their parents. The board turned us down, and we were very disappointed in that, but that's the way it was. And it was that way until the board was able to afford to have a professional, The children needed a voice that was not their parents.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
What other kinds of things do you remember from those early years?
Well, I jokingly called how important it was after each service to go in and have Mass and communion.
Right.
Because people would bring in food, even at that time. Nothing to the degree that we're doing right now. We've never had professional chefs. We've never had women that knew how to cook in a manner that we didn't know.
Yeah.
But I always felt at that time that that's when we saw visitors. And I remember myself walking through the front door in '64 and having Jan Barnhart come and say, "Oh, I'm so glad to see some young people," and would you like to be on the group that welcomes people? And so when I went in I jokingly said the Mass and communion, I would have my coffee and I would go over to people and say, "You have come to the right place, and please keep coming. Things change, but the people here," the dedication was very strong in the early days. I knew Ann Benner. I cared for Marianne Hemingway when she was dying. I knew Carol Aldridge, who had started the San Mateo Parents Co-op nursery school. These were the people that were here before I got here. They had started everything in 1952. They were movers and shakers and started us off in the right direction. I gather that's how many Unitarians, the one we belong to also the Unitarian Church in Sonora, because when Steve retired in 1998, we went up and spent 6 months in Big Trees, right next to the state park.
Nice.
But there's a Unitarian group in Sonora, and we send financial aid and spiritual connection to them. And they don't have money to be able to hire anybody.
Right.
And so there's an 1856 schoolhouse that is outside of Murphy's, and the 15 people are a community, and they meet every other Sunday. And so I understand now that Ray DeForce girls are building something in Murphy's, and I'm trying to get them connected to this old schoolhouse.
Yeah.
And the schoolhouse was the way I think many communities started Unitarianism. And we hadn't joined with Universalists.
Right.
Of course,
Exactly.
that was the 1960, and the women were on horses and they went west. I think the extended family was a big thing, and that was early on. We had about 20 people in that. We were meeting every month for sure, but we also traveled together, or we went to camping trips together. We wanted to make an impact on the earth. We said, don't buy a new lawnmower, don't buy a new tent. We have these things. So we kind of intercommunicated things. These extended families were started by Sally Reed, who had come from, I think, if it wasn't Salt Lake, it was some movement that had started there and that came here. And so it strengthened us.
Right.
To have extended families.
Yeah, I'm jealous of that. I think that's a great.
For people that had no family
Right.
here, that made such a connection.
Yeah. love that. What were the low points in UUSM history? Where has there been the most pain?
There was pain in sections that I didn't know about. My husband belonged in a men's group. Steve and most of the men were very dedicated to each other. They may be a group that wouldn't have all gone to a bar and talked. Mm-hmm. But there was one person in the group who actually was a person who, when anything got serious, he made jokes. Mm-hmm. He made jokes. And so after a while, the men's group dismissed. And Steve was very, very disappointed in that. But that was that man's behavior when things got to the point where they could have been talked about by other men. There was a group of men that then came and had lunch in the church every Wednesday, mm-hmm. Mark Wandrow's family. There was pain there. Then there was the women's group, and I went into the women's group, and I couldn't stay because there had been a lot of pain in a lot of the women's lives. Mm-hmm. They either had gone through divorces or other situations that were horrible for me to hear. Mm. And here I have 3 brothers in Philadelphia, and I had 2 male children at that point here, and I said, I can't stay with all of you. You despise men, or you don't understand them, or that you can't have them in your life. I can't be in this room. Mm. So I dropped out. Then got interested in other things, and of course the caring committee was a big thing for me. Mm. And Ann Mason and Betty, the people that I love, that wanted to give. Mm-hmm. So I did.
Did you enjoy that work?
Oh, I enjoyed it very much, very much. It was different because I had a backup with hospice. I remember a woman dying at hospice, and it turned out she was here in this community. Oh, wow. And so I cared for her, and she said, we'll have to change something, she said, because I'm dying, but I don't want to die here in this church. And I said, well, you're going to die in your house. We'll be there for you. She said, you will? So we could. Yeah. And Beck Hall, that was a little bit later, but Joe Beck was one of my patients from Mission Hospice, and he was the man here that was like Diane Candide. He could do everything. Mm-hmm. And when his wife, who was in a black place, committed suicide, mm-hmm. and his time came to die, he left us $25,000, which was a big amount of money to change the room from a gymnasium mm-hmm. to a more uplifted place where we were comfortable. Yeah. I had quite a few Mission Hospice patients, and I could say to people here, I know a hospice that you can really trust. Helen Campbell, and I knew some nuns, and there were other people too, but yeah. And because my mother had died in Philadelphia, and I had gone to hear a woman come and speak about dying over in the East Bay. She asked all of us in the room, how many here are dying? Raise your hand. Maybe 8 or 10 did. And she said, well, you're the lucky ones. The rest of us are dying, but we don't know when or how. Yeah. That was really a reason when Helen Campbell said, I'd like to help get a hospice started. Mm-hmm. But we had volunteers here at the church.
Nice. Yeah.
And we all knew we were going to die.
Yeah, right. Looking back over the years, what do you think this congregation does?
One of the things that they brought up many times was, what will we do with the picture, the
Jesus window.
The Jesus window. What will we do with the Jesus window? And that went back and forth and back and forth. And I was very much for the Jesus window. Because I had seen a lot of pictures, of course, people that didn't want that, but they didn't put down the other people. And the other thing that was very interesting to me was that the ability of this group to come up with a solution for what we would call UUSM. We had many ideas, but the Jewish families that were here, and we were full of them, it was wonderful. But they did not want it to be called a church. Mm-hmm. And the Christians didn't want it to be called a temple. Mm-hmm. We all kind of looked at each other. Well, we're a community. Are we going to call ourselves the San Mateo community? And everybody thought about that for a while. Maybe not that same day, but the next time we had a meeting about it. And they had decided, the group, we would just call it UUSM. Mm-hmm. And still, personally, if I was leaving the house and on Sunday morning, I'd say, I'm going to church.
Of course. Right.
But there were people that didn't like the window by the color. They had a woman who, from Belmont, who was a dancer, and she loved to dance. But she said, that's the wrong color to have in this building for dancing. And I think, what could she be talking about? The window had too much purple in it or something. But people accepted. Eventually, this woman and her husband, there wasn't a lot of antagonism. I was surprised about that. Because we've had a low point, and I jokingly had said to someone, well, you know, every minister in this church, except Bob Botley, have gotten divorced while they were here. And I think it's pretty hard for the ministers to keep the balls in the air. And then I jokingly said, and I guess we won't have to worry about that for our last minister, because he wouldn't need to get married again.
Right.
But everyone else, I was surprised after Bob Botley. Reverend Fraser and his wife, who was from Puerto Rico, stood up at the service and said, my wife and I want you to know something important. Our life is changing and we're getting divorced. Wow. I almost fell out of the pew. I couldn't believe that.
Yeah.
And then we had a very long period in the early church time history with 14 years with Joy Atkinson. Mm-hmm. And she also got divorced. And I never thought that would happen because she was married to an ACLU lawyer, but she commuted every day, and she was just so different in so many ways. My husband was on the support committee for Joy. I never knew what went on then. It was confidential.
Sure.
We had low points every time our ministers had low points. Yeah. And Bernie K was a low point. And I was friendly with his wife, and it was very hard to see the agony that some of the ministers had to go through. Mm-hmm. And if you were close to any of the ministers, then your compassion grew. Mm-hmm. I was on one of the choosing to have a minister. That was an experience.
What's unique about this congregation, about our identity?
I think we're known in the community. Congregation had a reputation for being active in politics, of walking and ringing doorbells, and being an educated group. I did not know that before I joined, but every time there was a protest parade in Redwood City, there would be a group here that would go down. Mm-hmm. We were involved with the kids and the teaching, with the Home and Hope and any of the other programs that would be something we offered. If it was Martin Luther King Day, we made a big deal out of that. Right. And I don't know about the rest of the community, but if the ministers had it in them for their spare time, every Thanksgiving, our church and any other church that had an active minister coordinating Thanksgiving. We would all meet in the same church, and our choir would mingle with their choir, and it was a big representation from this church.
Yeah.
I was really proud of that.
Yeah.
I was really proud.
What have been UUSM's key traditions and teachings over time? What principles have most informed our congregation?
I'm not a good one for asking about all of the principles. I know the ethics. I know the spiritual essence that I would get, but they may not be formalized under the group. If a minister would say offhandedly, the patient in the bed dying is you, or the patient in the bed is Jesus, or the homeless person is your brother. I mean, I could not give you the formal 8 principles. No, it's just not my thing to have a good memory for those principles. They're there, and they were always on the back of some brochure that we left in the pews.
Right.
I think we were known for our actions by lots of community. So we always had a flea market, and everyone here worked hours and hours. We would have everyone, this room especially, I think, was for the jewelry, and it was amazing the kind of congregational connection we had.
We're going to try to have a flea market again this year.
I heard that, and I was very proud of that, because the people need it. I was a co-parent during the early days because there was no school here for the children.
Right.
If the child got to Baywood and had wet his pants or forgot his lunch or hadn't gotten breakfast, I would go into the principal and say, I'm one of the co-parents for the children that are bused from the area around our church, and he needs or she needs lunch, and I'm going to bring up dry clothes, those sort of things. They were my people. So many moved away.
Yeah.
Claire Mack and I were very friendly. My son worked in her bakery for a while.
Oh, nice.
And she still makes cakes. And the other thing that I loved about this community, we had a women's potluck every so often. I miss that a lot.
There's actually someone who would like to restart that.
Oh, I would love that. Anita Davis made certain foods every night. We would read from either a Bible or some other nature books, or Chief Seattle, the Native Americans, ethics. That was important to us. We had some misconnections with Boston or with other people that had been sent here to help us in between ministers. One minister, during the lunch, the time during the summer, wouldn't let anybody hold hands. This was way before COVID.
Oh, sure.
Just a strange bird. And I was astounded. But it moves on.
When was UUSM most engaged with the wider community? What partnerships in the local community have been the most fruitful?
It might have been this Thanksgiving issue, that every Thanksgiving, what that meant for the women in the home is you had to cook your turkey or whatever else the night before, or get it started, because the thing that was important was to go to the Congregational Church, to the Methodist Church up in the 42nd Avenue, to the other churches. And we were known for the choir, and we were known for other kinds of help. We saved some people's lives they were transition people that came from Honduras. If you were cross-gendered, you would have been killed there.
Right.
And the Congregational Church took one man, and we took one woman, man. We made more connections with the Congregational Church, which we all laughed about because that's what had happened in the beginning when the Unitarians and the Puritans were there up in Boston. Right. There was a group that just wouldn't do with the other group.
Right.
And they were the Unitarians that got nudged out.
Yeah. What parts of our history and heritage do you think we should intentionally carry forward now?
Anyone that comes has an obligation, although we haven't always asked for a spiritual connection. We always asked for their behavioral connection. And we always asked for, at some point, a financial connection. I remember Bill Hughes coming to our house. He physically sent someone to your house in '64 and said, "Are you able to make a certain amount of donation to us?" And I said yes. And years later, I didn't know that he had a son who was a lawyer, and I was rear-ended on the El Camino, and I put that car in the garage because I said, I don't want to sue an 80-year-old lady. And the attorney kept saying, she'll never know that we're suing her. But anyhow, it turned out later, I found out that was Bill Hughes's son. I said, are you the son of Bill Hughes, the Unitarian? Oh, yes. Now I know why you're the way you are. I think our openness, and I think it's difficult because we don't have the financial backing. We don't have 100 children, and that's connected to the fact that we live in a time in San Mateo where the prices have gone out of. You need $3 million to get a house. The women are either working double at home or somewhere, but it's not available to so many. I know that people have tried joining up to each other, and Marty Hoffman had somebody, had Shirley Brim. I mean, there's this knowledge that we have to help each other. I have a friend down in Saratoga who, after my children leave in 2025, I've said that she can come and live at our house. I've had about 15 people live at our house, people that came to the door and they'd say, would you like to buy this Bible? No, I'm a Unitarian, I don't need this Bible, or that kind of thing. I know we're known for our actions.
Right. You talked about this just now a little bit, but as the world has changed over the last decade or two, religious communities have had to change and try new things. Given your experience and your perspective as an elder in our community, what do you see as our biggest challenges and our biggest opportunities now as a congregation?
I think we still have to be putting our feet on the path. People have to hear about us. People are writing letters. The other people that meet here know about us. The Peace and Justice Group have been meeting here for years. Michael Cagliano is in charge of that, and I think they will start coming back. We have gotten some Unitarians just from that group meeting here. And if you look at the letters to the editor on the Daily Journal, you'll see who the letters are from. I think small is good. I know there was a big pressure years ago for us to get more and more people here. But when you look at Sunday maybe it was just during the Christmas time, but this church was filled.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it was filled with the other seats up on the other area.
That's right.
I don't know how many more people we could get here.
Yeah.
But I want the idea of universalism to be able to be important. Most people might have heard of Unitarians and Universalists, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we're changing when I see the youth group,
Mm-hmm.
the OWL training. I could have used some of that sexual training way back when we didn't get any. I told everybody in 6th grade that your mothers had babies because they just cut open the middle of your belly. And I started a real rumpus in the Catholic Church way back in 1950s because I gave misinformation.
Mm-hmm. Not on purpose. But
not on purpose, but my
That's
mother
what you
said,
thought.
"You almost killed me. I was in labor with you so long," so my 3 brothers were all cesareans.
Uh-huh.
I remember how attached people were to Connie,
Yeah.
and her 3 generations were living with her. And when they needed help, Steve would go over and talk with her brothers, or when Laurie Fox's brother was on the streets, there were people here that would go and talk with him.
Mm-hmm.
I was only on a few committees, and I said I'm on committees at hospice, and I don't really want to be on too many committees here at church. But we needed some glue recently. I think we're getting more known by the groups that can come. At one point, way back when, we had women in hiding here in this building, and they were given permission from the board to be able to leave their abusive husbands. And I was so proud. We were not allowed as a community to come and interface with them except to leave food or to leave things here.
Mm-hmm.
And the community knew that we had women here that were being abused, and they had to be hidden because they could have easily been killed.
Sure.
I don't know the churches that would have had that ability.
Right.
I think we're expandable. I hope we're expandable still.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope everyone continues to be compassionate. I think that's what we need. It's the compassion.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of it, and we
Yes.
can share it.
Yeah.
So I thank you for having me.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you so much. I really enjoy
Uh,
being able to sit and talk to you.
I hope we can continue on our behavior of being open, and you'll see, you'll make sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Oh,
Joanne.
you're welcome.
And thanks to our listeners. Keep making connections.